In a quiet town near the edge of high, snowy mountains lived a man named Tom. Tom was different from the people in his town. While most spent their days working in shops, offices, or on farms, Tom had a dream that others could not understand. He wanted to build a small cabin in the mountains, far away from the noise and rush of everyday life. People in town laughed at him. Why would anyone want to live alone in the mountains? Ben, the owner of the local shop, asked one morning while arranging bread on the shelves. He will freeze, and then what? Mark, who worked at the gas station, added with a smirk, he is wasting his life. One snowstorm and he will be back running for help. Even the children in the streets made fun of him. They called him Cabin Man whenever they saw him carrying wood or tools. Tom heard the laughter and whispers. He saw the mocking faces when he passed by the market or the school. But he did not reply. He only nodded politely or smiled quietly. Nothing could stop him from following his dream. Each morning, Tom packed his bag with tools and food and began the long climb up the mountain. The path was not easy. Sharp rocks cut through his shoes, and strong winds tried to push him backward. The trees were thick, and sometimes he had to crawl under fallen branches. Yet Tom kept going. Every step brought him closer to the place he had chosen. The place he chose was a flat area surrounded by tall pine trees. From this spot, he could see the clouds floating below like slow rivers. The air was crisp and smelled of snow and pine. It was silent except for the sound of the wind and the occasional bird. Here, Tom felt calm and happy. He began building the cabin with his own hands. He cut trees carefully, measured each plank of wood, and placed stones to make the foundation strong. Day after day, the small cabin began to take shape. The walls grew taller. The roof slowly covered the top. The door was placed firmly, and windows were cut to let light in. It was a simple cabin, but it was sturdy. Tom worked from sunrise until the sky turned orange at evening. He rested only when the cold became too strong or the darkness made it hard to see. At night, he slept in a small tent near the cabin. The cold wind blew through the mountains, but he had learned to keep warm. He made a fire each night and covered himself with thick blankets. Sometimes he listened to the sound of snow hitting the trees and the howl of the wind. It was not frightening. To Tom, it was the song of the mountains. Back in town, people continued to mock him. They could not understand why someone would choose a life of loneliness and hard work. He thinks he is stronger than nature, Ben said to his friends one day. He is foolish to believe he can survive the mountains, Mark added. Only one person in the town did not laugh. Lena, a young woman who worked at the library, often saw Tom walking past the windows with his tools. She noticed his tired eyes and steady steps. One day she said softly, "He looks peaceful." Peaceful or foolish? Ben asked, shaking his head. Lena did not answer, because she could see something others could not. Tom was not foolish. He was patient, careful, and brave in his own quiet way. Weeks passed. The days grew colder, and dark clouds gathered more often around the peaks. The wind was sharper, and birds flew lower, closer to the town. Even the old hunters who knew the mountains well felt uneasy. "Winter will be heavy this year," one of them warned. Tom noticed it too. He knew that snowstorms could come suddenly and with great force. So he worked harder on his cabin. He added extra wood around the walls, strengthened the roof, and stored enough food and water to last for weeks. He chopped more firewood and arranged it carefully near the cabin door. He wanted to be ready for any storm. Every day, he learned something new. He learned how the mountain wind could change direction in minutes. He learned where the snow piled higher and where the trees could protect him. He learned which paths were safe to walk and which could lead to trouble. Everything he did was with patience and thought. Finally, the first snow arrived. Tiny flakes floated down quietly at first, and then the wind carried them faster, covering the ground in white. Tom stood by the cabin and watched. The cabin was now complete. It was small, but strong. The fire inside warmed the wooden walls, and the lamp glowed through the windows. Down in town, people still laughed. They did not understand why Tom had worked so hard or why he wanted to live in such a cold, lonely place. They only saw snow, cold, and danger, and they believed that Tom's dream would end in failure. But Tom knew something they did not. He had prepared. He had respected the mountains and learned from them. He had built his cabin with care, using patience and wisdom. When the storm came, he would be ready. High above the town, clouds began to cover the mountain peaks. The wind whispered through the trees, and the first serious snowstorm of the season slowly approached. Tom walked around his cabin, checking the firewood, the door, and the small chimney. He felt calm. He felt ready. For the first time, the mountains seemed to welcome him. The snow fell softly on the roof, and the tall pine trees around him swayed gently in the wind. Tom smiled. He had done something no one in the town had dared to do. He had chosen his path, built his home, and faced the cold with courage. The townspeople could not see it yet, but soon they would understand. The blizzard was coming, and only those who were prepared would survive it safely. Tom was ready, and he would prove that patience, courage, and careful work could overcome fear and mockery. The snow continued to fall, the wind grew stronger, and Tom sat by the warm fire in his sturdy cabin. Outside, the mountains waited. The morning after the first snow, the mountains looked different. The tall pine trees wore white coats, and the ground was soft with fresh snow. Tom stepped outside his cabin and felt the cold air on his face. The wind was stronger now, and clouds rolled across the sky, hiding the sun. He checked the paths around his cabin. The snow was soft in some places and deep in others. He marked safe areas with small wooden sticks so he could find his way if the snow covered the ground entirely. Tom carried a small pack of supplies and started walking to the nearby stream. He needed water. The stream was partly frozen, and small ice crystals floated on the surface. Tom broke the ice carefully and collected fresh water in his container. As he walked back, the wind began to pick up. Snowflakes fell faster, and the sky darkened. Tom knew the storm was approaching. He moved quickly, carrying the water and firewood back to the cabin. Every piece of wood was important. He stacked it neatly near the fire pit, ready for the long, cold night ahead. Inside the cabin, Tom lit the fire. The flames danced on the wood, and warmth spread quickly. He checked his supplies. Enough food for days, water for a week, extra blankets, and candles were all ready. The cabin was small, but it had everything needed to survive a harsh storm. Tom felt a quiet satisfaction. He had worked hard to prepare, and now it would matter. Outside, the wind howled. The snow swirled around the trees, forming small white waves. The mountains were alive with movement. Tom watched the storm from the small window. He saw the pine branches bend under the weight of the snow. He saw the clouds press close to the peaks, heavy and dark. The storm would be strong. Tom remembered the laughter from the town. People had mocked him for building a cabin in such a place. They thought he was foolish, but he had prepared with care. The storm was coming, and their words meant nothing compared to what he had learned and built. By afternoon, the snow was falling fast. The wind was sharp and loud, creating sounds like giant waves crashing against the mountains. Tom checked the cabin doors and windows. The walls were strong, the roof was solid, and the door fit tightly. Nothing would let the snow enter. He added a small wooden bar across the door for extra safety. After making sure everything was secure, Tom prepared a simple meal. He cooked rice with vegetables and added a small piece of dried meat for flavor. He ate slowly, enjoying the warmth of the fire and the quiet comfort of being prepared. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin, everything was calm. As night fell, the blizzard grew stronger. Snow whipped against the cabin walls, and the wind made the small building shake slightly. Tom closed his eyes for a moment, listening. The storm was powerful, but he felt no fear. He had faced the mountains before and learned their ways. He knew how to live with their strength. Around midnight, the storm reached its peak. Snow fell in thick layers, and the wind howled like a wild animal. The trees bent low, and the ground disappeared under the white blanket. Tom stayed inside, keeping the fire alive. The light from the fire reflected on the snow outside, giving the cabin a warm glow that could be seen even from a distance if anyone were looking. Hours passed, and the storm showed no sign of stopping. Tom checked his food and water again. He had enough, but he also knew it was important to stay alert. The mountains could be unpredictable. A branch could fall, a snowdrift could block the door, or the wind could weaken a part of the roof. Every detail mattered. In the middle of the night, Tom heard a loud crack. A large branch from a pine tree had fallen near the cabin. The snow had made the wood heavy, and the wind had pushed it down. Tom grabbed his coat and boots and carefully went outside. The wind was so strong that it almost pushed him back. He used a long stick to move the branch away from the cabin. He worked slowly, carefully, knowing that a mistake could be dangerous. Once the branch was clear, Tom returned inside. He warmed his hands by the fire and drank some water. His heart beat fast, but he felt proud. He had protected his home. He had faced a test and passed it. Through the long night, Tom stayed awake at intervals, checking the fire and listening to the storm. He observed how the snow drifted, how the wind changed direction, and how the trees moved. He learned from every sound, every shift in the storm. He knew that surviving the mountains was not just about preparation, it was about awareness and respect for nature. By early morning, the blizzard began to slow. Snow still fell, but the wind had softened. Tom looked outside. The mountains were covered in white, and the trees stood tall despite the storm. The cabin had not moved. Nothing had entered. He smiled quietly. His work had been worth it. The cabin was safe, and he was safe. Tom stepped outside. The snow was soft under his boots. He walked carefully around the cabin, checking the walls and the roof. Everything was solid. The storm had tested him, and he had passed. He felt a strong sense of achievement. He had built more than a cabin. He had built a place of safety, a place where he could live with peace even in the hardest conditions. As the sun rose, light reflected off the snow and turned the mountains into a bright, white landscape. The sky was clear for the first time in days, and the wind had calmed. Tom took a deep breath. The air was fresh and clean. The storm had shown its power, but he had shown his strength in return. Back in town, people were waking up to the results of the blizzard. Roads were blocked with snow, trees had fallen, and many were struggling to stay safe. Some had to leave their homes temporarily. They began to hear rumors of Tom's cabin in the mountains. "Is it true he stayed up there alone?" someone asked. "He must have frozen," another said. But Tom did not freeze. He had learned, prepared, and survived. The mountains had tested him, and he had proven himself. As the town slowly dug itself out of the snow, Lena walked through the streets, thinking about Tom. She had always admired his quiet strength. Now she realized that his courage and preparation had kept him safe when others struggled. She smiled, feeling respect and a little wonder. Tom remained in his cabin, watching the mountains and the snow. He felt a quiet happiness. He had chosen his path and had faced nature on his own terms. He had survived the storm because he respected the mountains and prepared carefully. The mountains were calm again, but Tom knew that winter had just begun. Snowstorms would come again, and each one would test him in new ways. But he was ready. The cabin was strong, his skills were sharp, and his mind was steady. He had learned the most important lesson: respect for nature, patience, and preparation could turn even the fiercest storm into a challenge that could be met. For now, he sat by the fire, watching the snow sparkle in the morning light, and felt a deep sense of peace. The mountains were alive, but he was alive too. He had faced them alone and had not failed. The morning after the blizzard, the mountains were quiet. Snow covered every tree, rock, and path. The sky was pale blue, and the sun reflected on the snow, making the world shine. Tom stepped outside his cabin, feeling the cold but clean mountain air. The storm had tested him, but he had survived. He looked around. Snow drifts blocked some paths, and small trees had fallen under the weight of snow. Tom knew the mountains could be tricky. One careless step could mean trouble. but he had learned from the storm. He understood the land now better than before. Every ridge, every small hill, every pine tree gave him a sense of direction. Tom began his morning work. He cleared the snow from around the cabin so that it would not press against the walls. He checked the roof carefully. Heavy snow could cause damage if left too long. Using a long wooden pole, he gently pushed the snow off in small pieces. The work was slow, but he was patient. Each movement was careful and precise. While clearing snow, he noticed animal tracks nearby. Small rabbits had moved through the snow, and a fox had walked past the cabin. Tom smiled quietly. The mountains were full of life, even in winter. He respected these animals and made sure not to disturb their paths. Observing them also taught him how the snow affected movement. Some areas were easy to walk in, and others could trap a person if not careful. After finishing outside, Tom returned to the cabin. He prepared breakfast. He cooked oatmeal and added dried fruits. The warm meal made him feel strong and ready for the day. He ate slowly, listening to the quiet wind outside. Even after the storm, the mountains were alive with movement. Snow still fell lightly from the trees, and the wind whispered over the peaks. Tom had noticed signs of another storm approaching. Clouds were forming quickly over the higher mountains, and the wind had shifted direction. This time, he would be ready earlier. He checked his supplies. Extra blankets, more firewood, and additional food were all in place. The cabin was strong, but he knew the mountain could be unpredictable. Preparation was key. Later in the morning, Tom decided to explore the nearby slopes. He wanted to understand how the snow had changed the area. He put on his warm coat and boots and started walking slowly. The snow was deep in some parts, and he had to lift his legs higher than usual. The cold was sharp, but it helped him stay alert. As he climbed, he saw the damage caused by the blizzard. Small trees were broken, and rocks had been pushed by the wind. Some paths that had been easy to walk were now blocked. He made careful notes in his mind, remembering which paths were safe and which were dangerous. This knowledge would help him in the future. While exploring, Tom saw something unexpected. A small bird had fallen from a tree. It was weak and shivering. Tom gently picked it up and brought it back to the cabin. He wrapped it in a soft cloth and placed it near the fire. He prepared some seeds mixed with water for the bird. Over time, the bird began to regain strength. Tom named it Snow, after the first heavy snowstorm. The bird stayed close to Tom throughout the day. It became a small companion, reminding him that even in isolation, life could be shared. Tom spoke softly to Snow, telling it about the cabin, the mountains, and the storm. He felt a quiet joy in caring for another living being. As evening approached, the clouds over the mountains grew darker. Tom knew a second storm was coming, stronger than the first. This time, he would need more careful planning. He prepared the cabin for the night. He checked the firewood, ensuring enough for 2 days. He arranged his blankets and food for easy access. He even built a small windbreak outside to prevent drifting snow from piling up near the door. The second storm began slowly. First, a few snowflakes fell, then the wind grew stronger. The cabin walls shivered under the gusts, and the snow swirled around like white water. Tom was not afraid. He watched carefully, noticing how the wind changed direction. He adjusted his small windbreak and secured the door further with extra wooden bars. The storm grew heavier through the night. Tom stayed close to the fire, keeping it alive and bright. Snow piled higher outside, but the cabin remained safe. Snow, the bird, chirped softly nearby, and Tom smiled. Even in the harshest weather, life found a way to continue. During the night, Tom heard the sound of a tree cracking. He knew the storm had moved it from its place. He also heard distant sounds of animals struggling through the snow. He realized the mountains were full of challenges, not just for humans but for all creatures. He thought about how people in the town would never understand this. They saw only the danger, never the preparation and skill required to survive. The storm lasted most of the night. Tom stayed awake in shifts, checking the fire, the cabin, and the small bird. He listened to the sound of the wind, learning how it moved across the slopes. He understood that the mountain was not an enemy, but a teacher. Respecting it was the only way to survive. By morning, the storm slowed. Snow still fell lightly, but the wind had softened. Tom stepped outside to examine the area. The slopes were filled with snowdrifts, and the trees leaned from the weight of the snow. Some rocks were hidden beneath fresh snow, making paths tricky. Tom noted the safest routes back to the cabin and marked them with sticks. He checked on Snow. The small bird had survived the night and was now chirping happily. Tom prepared a small meal for both of them. As he ate, he thought about how the storm had tested him. It had been harder than the first, but he had stayed calm, worked carefully, and kept safe. The cabin had held strong. His preparation and patience had paid off. High above, the mountains were silent for the first time in hours. Tom walked to the edge of a slope and looked down at the town far below. People were still struggling with snow and cold. Some had lost power or food supplies. Tom felt a quiet pride. He had built his cabin with care. He had faced the storm alone and succeeded. The day passed slowly. Tom repaired small damage to the cabin caused by the wind. He reinforced the roof and walls and made sure the door was tightly closed. He cleaned the paths around the cabin to prevent snow from blocking the entrance. Every action was careful and deliberate. He knew that the mountain demanded respect, not rush. By evening, the storm had ended completely. The snow sparkled under the fading sun, and the mountains looked calm and beautiful. Tom sat by the fire, watching the light change on the peaks. Snow chirped happily nearby. He felt peaceful. He had survived the storm, learned from it, and respected the mountain. For the first time, he thought about the town. People had mocked him for his choice, but now they could not ignore what he had done. He had faced harsh conditions alone and had thrived. Preparation, patience, and courage had kept him safe. One day, he thought, they might understand. As night came, Tom looked outside once more. The mountains were quiet, the air cold and fresh. The cabin was safe, the fire warm, and the small bird rested nearby. Tom smiled. He had faced 2 storms and had survived both. He was ready for the winter that lay ahead. The mountains were challenging, but they also offered peace and beauty. Tom had learned how to live with them, not against them. The blizzard had shown him the mountain's strength, and he had proven that respect, patience, and careful planning could overcome any challenge. The morning after the second storm, the mountains were calm. Snow sparkled under the bright sun, and the sky was clear and pale blue. Tom stepped outside his cabin, feeling the crisp air fill his lungs. The world was quiet except for the soft sound of snow falling from tree branches. The cabin had survived the storm perfectly. The walls were strong, the roof held steady, and the door had kept the cold out. Tom smiled as he looked around. He had prepared for this. Every plank, every stone, every careful decision had made the cabin safe. He felt proud, but not arrogant. The mountains were strong, and he knew he had only survived because he had worked with them, not against them. Tom cleared the snow from the cabin paths. The snow was deep, soft, and heavy in places. He pushed it gently, careful not to strain himself or break the wood that marked the paths. He moved with slow, steady movements. Every step had a purpose, every action was thoughtful. As he worked, he noticed distant movement far down the slopes. A small group of people was walking carefully through the snow. They were from the town. They had come up the mountain, and their faces looked tired and worried. Snow had blocked roads and pathways, and they must have realized that the mountains were more dangerous than they thought. Tom watched silently. They did not see him yet. They struggled over the snow, slipping and sliding, carrying packs that were not well prepared for the cold. He recognized some of the people: Ben, the shop owner, and Mark from the gas station. They had mocked him before, but now they faced the storm and snow on their own. Tom felt a quiet determination. He would not laugh at them or scold them. He had learned that the mountains were powerful and deserved respect. Instead, he prepared to help if they needed it. He picked up his coat, gloves, and some extra blankets, and he moved toward the small slope that led down to the town trail. The group struggled. The snow was deep, and the wind was beginning to pick up again. Tom stepped carefully down the slope and called out softly, "Do you need help?" Ben looked up, surprised. He did not recognize the calm figure at first. "Tom?" he asked, disbelief in his voice. You are up here?" Tom nodded. "Yes. The cabin is strong, and I have prepared for the storms. You should come with me. It is safer." Mark looked embarrassed. He had mocked Tom for building the cabin alone, but now he realized how wrong he had been. We did not think it would be this bad," he said. Tom smiled gently. "It is not about thinking. It is about preparation and respect for the mountains. Follow me carefully." The townspeople followed Tom through the snow. He led them along the safest path, avoiding weak snow patches and hidden rocks. His steps were careful, and he paused often to make sure everyone was keeping up. The wind was cold, but Tom's calm voice and steady movements gave the group confidence. Finally, they reached the cabin. It was small but sturdy, with smoke rising from the chimney. The warm light shone through the windows, and the door opened easily. Tom stepped aside to let the group enter. Inside, the cabin was warm and safe. The fire burned brightly, and the smell of wood and warmth filled the small space. The townspeople removed their wet clothes and blankets and sat near the fire. They were tired, cold, and a little humbled. Tom offered them food and water. He had cooked enough for the storm, and now he shared it. The townspeople were quiet at first, unsure how to respond. Ben finally spoke. "Tom, we mocked you. We thought you were foolish. But now we see we were wrong. You built this cabin. You survived the storms. You prepared. You respected the mountain." Tom shook his head gently. "It is not about being right or wrong. The mountain teaches lessons. I only listened and prepared. Anyone who respects it can survive." Mark nodded slowly. "We never understood. We laughed, but now we see. The storms are too strong for people who do not prepare. You were brave, but also careful." Tom smiled. "Courage without preparation is danger. Preparation without respect is arrogance. The mountain shows its power. It is both beautiful and harsh. It is up to each person to learn and listen." Lena, who had also come with the group, watched quietly. She had always admired Tom's calm strength, and now she saw why. He had survived storms that others feared. He had helped people without anger or pride. She felt respect and admiration grow in her heart. As the day passed, the group recovered. Tom showed them how to check paths, how to move safely in deep snow, and how to read the signs of a coming storm. The townspeople listened carefully. They realized that they had underestimated the mountains and overestimated their own strength. Now, they learned from someone who had worked with nature, not against it. Outside, the sun began to set. The mountains were golden with light, and snow sparkled like tiny stars. Tom stepped outside briefly to check the paths again. Snow had fallen lightly, but the cabin remained strong. The wind was calm, and the mountains seemed peaceful after the storms. The townspeople gathered around him. "We will never forget this," Ben said quietly. "We mocked you for building alone, but you showed us courage, skill, and respect. We will remember your lessons." Tom nodded. "It is not about memory. It is about action. Winter is not over. The storms will come again. Those who prepare, respect, and work carefully will survive. Those who do not will struggle." The group stayed the night in the cabin. They shared warmth, food, and stories. They saw the mountain through Tom's eyes, and for the first time, they understood. It was not just snow and cold. It was life, challenge, and beauty. The mountain tested people, but it also rewarded those who respected it. As night fell, Tom looked at the small bird, Snow, resting quietly nearby. He smiled. Even in harsh conditions, life could survive and even thrive. The bird was a reminder that care, patience, and attention mattered, even in the smallest details. The townspeople slept better that night than they had in weeks. They were warm, fed, and safe. They understood now that their previous mocking had been foolish. Tom had shown them what preparation and respect could achieve. High above, the mountains were quiet. The snow glistened under the moonlight. The storms had passed, but winter had only begun. Tom knew there would be more challenges, more lessons, and more opportunities to show the strength of careful planning and courage. For now, he sat by the fire, watching the town below from the small cabin window. The people who had laughed at him before now saw him as a teacher, a guide, and a survivor. Tom had not built the cabin to impress anyone. He had built it to live safely, peacefully, and respectfully. Yet, through his actions, he had inspired others without trying. The mountains were calm. The wind was soft. Snow covered the slopes like a white blanket. Tom felt peace and quiet happiness. He had survived storms, taught lessons, and gained respect not through words, but through action. The blizzards would come again, but the cabin was strong, Tom was prepared, and the mountains had become a teacher, not a threat. Through patience, courage, and respect, life could thrive even in the harshest winter. Winter had settled deeply in the mountains. Snow covered every slope, tree, and rock. The air was cold, sharp, and clear. Tom stepped outside his cabin and breathed deeply. The past storms had tested him, but he had learned to live with the mountains, not fight them. The mountains had become a place of knowledge, challenge, and peace. The town below was quiet in the morning. Roads were blocked with snow, and people struggled to manage daily life. Many thought of Tom. They remembered how he had survived the storms while they had faced hardship. His courage and preparation had become a quiet story that traveled through the town. Tom began his day by checking the cabin and the surrounding paths. Snow had fallen lightly during the night, and small drifts had formed. He cleared the paths carefully, making sure the entrance to the cabin was open and safe. Every movement was deliberate. He had learned that small mistakes in the mountains could become serious problems. While clearing snow, Tom heard distant voices. He looked carefully and saw a group approaching from below. It was the town people who had stayed in his cabin during the last storm. They carried supplies, tools, and warm clothing. Their faces were serious but respectful. They had come to learn more from him and to offer help in the mountains. Tom stepped forward and called softly, "Come carefully. The snow is deep in some places." The townspeople followed, moving slowly and paying attention to the paths he had marked. Ben, Mark, Lena, and a few others were in the group. Their expressions showed respect now. They had seen Tom survive storms that had frightened everyone else. They had experienced the power of preparation and courage firsthand. When they reached the cabin, Tom welcomed them inside. The fire burned brightly, filling the small space with warmth. Tom offered them food and water. They ate quietly, thinking about the lessons they had learned from the mountain and from Tom's careful planning. Lena spoke first. "Tom, we never understood before. We mocked you for building alone, but now we see. You faced storms we could not handle. You prepared. You respected the mountain. You are our teacher." Tom shook his head gently. "I am no teacher. I only listen, prepare, and act carefully. The mountain shows its strength. It is up to each person to learn and respect it. The storms test everyone. They do not favor any man. Preparation and patience are the keys to survive." Ben looked down. "We laughed at you. We thought it was foolish. But now we see we were wrong. We will never forget what you have shown us." Mark nodded slowly. "We will work with the mountain, not against it. We will respect its power and plan carefully. You showed us the way." Tom smiled quietly. "It is not about showing. It is about doing what is right. The mountain will teach, but it also rewards careful work. Anyone who listens can survive." The townspeople spent the day helping Tom. They reinforced the cabin walls with extra wood, stacked more firewood, and organized the stored food and water. They learned by watching Tom's careful movements and listening to his calm instructions. They understood that the mountain demanded patience, respect, and planning. Outside, snow continued to fall lightly. The wind was calm, but the mountains were unpredictable. Tom showed them how to check paths for safety, how to read the signs of changing weather, and how to move without disturbing the snow and ice too much. The townspeople learned quickly. They realized that surviving in the mountains was not just about strength, but intelligence, care, and observation. As evening approached, the group looked out at the mountains. The sun reflected on the snow, turning it golden and bright. The trees swayed gently, and the air was quiet and clean. The town below was small in comparison, covered by snow and winter silence. The mountains seemed alive, but peaceful after the recent storms. Lena looked at Tom and said softly, "You built this cabin alone, survived storms, and taught us how to live safely. You are brave, patient, and wise." Tom nodded. Bravery is nothing without preparation. Patience is only useful when paired with care. Wisdom comes from observing and learning. The mountain gives lessons to those who listen. The townspeople stayed the night in the cabin. They slept close to the fire, feeling safe and warm. For the first time, they understood that the mountain was not just cold and dangerous, but alive and teaching. Tom had survived, not by strength alone, but by careful thought, respect, and patience. The next morning, Tom led the townspeople on a small hike through the nearby slopes. He showed them safe areas, hidden paths, and spots where snow could trap a person. They moved slowly, learning to watch the wind, the clouds, and the snow. Every step was a lesson. One of the townspeople, a young man named Sam, slipped on a small patch of ice. Tom reached him quickly and guided him to safe ground. "Always pay attention to what is under your feet," he said calmly. "The mountain is beautiful, but it can be dangerous when ignored." Sam nodded. "I understand now. I never thought snow and ice could be so tricky." By midday, they returned to the cabin. Everyone was tired but happy. They had learned more about survival, respect, and preparation in one day than they had in their entire lives in town. The storms had shown them the mountain's power, and Tom had shown them how to live safely in it. Tom spent the afternoon organizing supplies. He prepared extra firewood, checked water containers, and stacked food neatly. Snow, the small bird, chirped nearby, hopping on the floor and watching the activity. Tom smiled at the bird. It had survived storms and cold just like he had. Care and attention had kept life alive in harsh conditions. As night came, the townspeople gathered around the fire. Ben and Mark spoke quietly, their voices full of respect. "We mocked you before. We did not understand. Now we see that preparation, patience, and respect are stronger than fear or strength alone. You have taught us well." Lena added, "You did not just survive. You helped us learn. You have shown the power of careful work and courage." Tom shook his head. "I only listened, acted, and respected the mountain. The mountain gives lessons. Anyone who watches and learns can survive. It is not about being brave alone. It is about being careful, patient, and aware." The group stayed by the fire late into the night. The mountains were calm, the wind soft, and snow sparkled in the firelight. For the first time, the townspeople understood what it meant to respect nature. They realized that Tom's work had not been foolish, but wise. He had built more than a cabin. He had built knowledge, safety, and respect for the mountains. The next morning, Tom watched the sunrise. Snow glistened on every slope. The sky was clear, and the mountains stretched far and wide. He felt peace and quiet happiness. He had faced storms alone, survived them, and helped others understand the mountain. The town below would remember this winter forever. People had laughed at Tom at first, but now they respected him deeply. They had learned that courage without preparation is dangerous, that patience without care is wasted, and that respect for nature is the true key to survival. Tom stepped outside one last time that morning. The air was crisp and cold. Snow fell lightly from the trees. He looked at the cabin, strong and warm, and then at the mountains, vast and silent. He felt proud, not of himself, but of the work, preparation, and patience that had kept life safe. The town below would never forget what he had taught them. The storms had tested them all, but Tom had shown them the way. Bravery, preparation, and respect had survived the blizzards. The mountains had been harsh, but life had endured. Tom returned to the cabin and sat by the fire, snow chirping nearby. Outside, the mountains were peaceful. The lessons of the storm were clear. Life was stronger when careful thought, patience, and respect guided action. Tom had built more than a cabin in the mountains. He had built understanding, safety, and trust. The mountains remained, strong and silent. But now, both Tom and the town had learned how to live with them. The blizzards had come and gone, but the knowledge, courage, and preparation that survived would last forever.